All right. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by Cam Stuart of Locked On Baylor. And Cam, I've been wanting to have this discussion with another Locked On host for a little bit now. And you guys have played Utah 2 years in a row. So I thought this would be something fun to discuss. Utah is a very polarizing presence in the Big 12. Some of the fans have done Utah no favors. Some of the Utah fans, like by painting a target on the back. I know for me, like people weren't happy with how I talked about the Utah team coming into last year because like most of the media I thought they were a deserving favorite to win the conference on paper. Then Cam gets hurt and a bunch of other things happen. And you just didn't go Utah's way. But I'll say this. I do think, despite all the drama and everything, I do think Utah works in the Big 12. In fact, I think they're really fun in the Big 12 because I think in a lot of ways they're a villain. And that's where it makes it a lot of fun, is that other teams get frustrated with them. And I kind of like that in some ways Utah has that target on their back. I think this is a fun conference too. I've just enjoyed being part of the Big 12, building these new rivalries, having the games involved. I hope Utah is looking to stay in the Big 12, and I do think that they are. And I've enjoyed this first year. I'm excited about the future. I think Utah works in the Big 12. How do you see it?
Well, I think to throw a question at a question, and you kind of touched on it in there, isn't so much isn't so much as Utah, do they work in the Big 12? Do Utah fans want them to work in the Big 12? I think is more of the question from our standpoint, because I think they work great. And we talked about this in the preseason. Like Utah, as I would say a program on the rise. It's been on the rise for 15 years, really, or 20, even if you want to go back even farther. But in terms of building up that brand and that recruiting status and the big time bowl games and all that, and the strides that Utah has made as a school, which shouldn't be kind of pushed aside either for when you're taking someone into a conference. It is a major state university that has a big old football stadium, wins a lot of games. That to me fits right in with the Big 12, which rocks, by the way. The Big 12 rocks. Yes, and it's too bad that some Utah fans don't see that, because I see Ute fans on Twitter all the time talking about how, this part of the Big 12 sucks. And, look at the attendance in the Big 12 championship game. We had better attendance when we were in the Pac-12. It's like, you want to go back to the Pac-12? Go back. They'll take you in a second. I mean, you want to go and have that? And that plus I look at the standings at a team that was 2-7 in this conference, this awful conference with no fans and no prestige. It's like, man, do you even want to be here? Like, I mean, I would have loved Baylor to get another shot at Utah with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback for the Bears. So it's more a question for me of like, I see all these fans on Twitter, and it's like, do they want to be in the Big 12? Because I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on in the Big 12. And again, with Utah's stability, I think they're a team that could be challenging for the conference championship most years. That's what we're trying to figure out in this new conference without UT and Oklahoma, although UT kind of took the last decade off, of who's going to be that team that's kind of in the mix every year. And if you had asked me before the season, I would have told you Utah and Oklahoma State. And we saw how that factored in this year with a combined 2-16 conference record. But I think those are two teams that should be in the mix every year. And again, this is not a diss on Utah. This is I think a compliment on Utah. This is where they should be. Like, this is the kind of conference Utah should be in. They Pac-12 obviously would make more sense geographically, but it's not there anymore. Then you're playing Utah State in conference. Have fun with that. You know what I mean? But it's not there anymore. The Big 12 is a perfect spot for them. They're biggest rivals in this conference. It expands their recruiting map, which I know we're going to talk about. And it is the third best conference in America. Like, I don't know that a Utah program competes in the Big 10 or the SEC every year. I can't say that at all, but I can say it with the Big 12. And you saw it. I mean, this was actually kind of a everyone beats everybody year in the Big 12. Most years you're going to have, in a 12-team format, two teams either in or around that 12 playoff. And so if I'm Utah, I'm like, look, this is a conference that is going to give me the best chance to be successful every year. I wouldn't be denigrating the Big 12 as much as some fans are on social media.
Great points, but number one, I got to start with technically 3-7. I want that win against Baylor to count. We still beat.
Hey, I mean, I think that's actually fair. I think that's fair.
I will say something that I totally agree with you. If Utah, because I've done this before with BYU, because that a couple years ago when BYU beat Utah, by the end of the year, Utah was better than them. Baylor was better than Utah by the end of the season. But I still want that win as a conference win counted. That's where like we get compared to an Oklahoma State who didn't win this. It's like, oh, Utah only won 2 more games. Well, technically, we at least got to win against.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
Another thing that you brought up that was so true, just about like people bringing up the attendance in the Big 12 title game. I can find several examples of Pac-12 championship games that were not well attended. So I don't think that should be used as a metric. There was
like the Big 12, it didn't have a great attendance this year. It did not. I thought that was a bad look. But you look around also college football this year. The conference championship games did not have the same sting with a 12-team playoff. Which look,
they did not.
If these opening campus rounds of the playoff are fantastic, which they probably should be,
I think they will.
Then you'll probably concede as a fan that the conference championship games aren't that great. But sorry, I didn't mean to hijack that. It was just such an interesting point. I thought that they were like, oh, look at the attendance. Like, who cares, really?
Well, I mean, some of those too. Like if we do when Utah played USC, geographically, that was a 7-hour trip for the Trojans. I want to say it's a 6-hour trip for Utah, a drive. The Iowa State and the Sun Devils don't have that luxury. That's not as
Trust me, I basically just did that. It's not fun. Long? It's not a long. I mean, to Ames from Arlington, it was probably like 7 or 8 hours.
Oh, so it is a long. Okay, so it actually is a long.
It's a haul. It's kind of a haul, man. I mean, then again, you do have like a lot of Kansas City, Iowa State people. So anyway,
we're not locked on geography, so I apologize. I apologize if that was wrong there, but I just do feel like it's a longer drive and trip. So like it's just not as convenient as some of those Pac-12 titles were, and there are definitely years where the Pac-12 attendance was down. So I'm not a fan of that. And I think talking about some of the other things you brought up, this is the other thing I'll say that just makes it very hard when Utah's athletic director goes out there and says we were not happy to be in the Big 12 today. And I do believe, like, if you listen and ask Mark Harlan, he meant in that moment, he let his frustration get the best of him and was talking specifically about that moment. But at the end of the day, the athletic director at Utah said, we're not happy right now. I'm not happy to be in the Big 12. That's what he said. Did he mean in general, as in all athletics? No, he just meant in that exact moment because he was frustrated with the refs, even though one of the refs was a Pac-12 ref. So that's where it was also kind of a wild statement that he made when he was just losing his mind there. So overall, I do believe most Utah athletics, I think, is happy in the Big 12. And I also believe that Utah fans are happy to be in the Big 12. There's always going to be that majority that thinks that they're just better, I guess. But unfortunately, it's just not true. And another thing you mentioned too, did I want, back when all the conference realignment was going crazy, was I hopeful that Utah was going to make the Big Ten? Yeah, it was just like the best. It's the best of the like Big Ten SEC. Like that's the club that if you can get into, you want to be in new. But Utah is not in a position where they can compete for conference titles in the Big Ten. So I'm glad they're in the Big 12, where what's fun about the Big 12 is we have so many different teams and brands that can win it. People could say, that's crazy. Arizona State just won the league and they were picked to finish dead last. So this is a wild conference. It's an open conference. I think it's a lot of fun. This is where Utah belongs. And I think overall, most fans are happy for it. They're enjoying it. They're excited because this is the future. Like this is what Utah is in now. There's a lot of exciting things, these new rivalries I mentioned that are being built, and the opportunity to get to the playoff each year for Utah exists because of this format. So I believe most Utah fans are happy, Cam, but I definitely get what you're saying in terms of that. There's a vocal majority on social media that doesn't make it feel like Utah fans are happy.
That's where you get the villain stuff.
That's right.
Which, look, I mean, every conference needs a couple of those too.
They do. Is it Utah? Do you view Utah as the biggest villain in the Big 12? This is definitely going to be a title on this show in the future. Like, is Utah the villain of the Big 12?
Right now, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's weirdly because of a social media presence. I mean, obviously, like you mentioned, Mark Harlan didn't do any favors right there. But here, you can clip it. Utah is the villain of the Big 12. Like, full stop. We got rid of UT and OU, which were the ultimate villains. Like, and there will be some ones that pop up periodically. You know, nobody outside of Boulder really loved CU in the conference this year. They weren't big Colorado fans. That could be one. But Utah came in with this air of superiority. And it absolutely translated online, which is where we're going to judge most of these fan bases now. So yeah, Utah is the villain of the Big 12 right now.
Mm-hmm. And it can't be Iowa State and Arizona State. I'm sorry, but like Iowa State was their first time making the conference title game forever. Like if they go on a dynasty, obviously you become that. The Chiefs weren't always the most disliked team in the NFL, and now they definitely are, just like the Patriots were back then. Arizona State, they just won it 1 year and they're picked to finish dead last. I don't see them as the villain.
If they keep winning, though, that Dillingham, that could get annoying.
That's a great point.
I'm telling you.
Point about how teams and people view Kenny Dillingham.
Man.
He could build himself into that. But yeah, just like Alabama is like the villain of the SEC for what they had done, and more so in Utah's case, right? It's not what they've done in the Big 12. It's how they spoke when entering it too, and coming in with some recent conference championship victories. So they felt like, okay, myself included, obviously, Utah's going to get off to a hot start, and they didn't. So I feel that way too. I think that Utah is kind of viewed as the villain in the conference. And like I said, I kind of like having the target on Utah's back personally. I just think it's kind of fun when everyone wants to talk about it's my team and me against the world. Well, in Utah, in a lot of ways in the Big 12, it actually is, because no one really roots for Utah. Not like every conference is rooting for other people too. But I think if Utah and like Texas Tech play, Cam, you're cheering for.
I'm wrecking them.
Yeah, exactly.
I got a weird relationship with Tech, but I will root for Tech over Utah. Yeah,
exactly. I will. That's what we're talking about. So,
if it's a conference championship and Utah wins it, there will be one congratulation text to JT Wistrcill, and that's it. That's it. Thank you for making it to the end of the video, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network part of your daily routine. We have got you covered with the most Baylor Bears athletics coverage of any outlet that's not directly tied into Baylor University. So if you want more of that, be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping a video here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, and sick 'em.